So we just had the weekly registration numbers in China. We can see that Tesla is enjoying a nice 10-week average with the trend line going very sharply upwards. LiAuto is also going upwards, but slightly less. In regards to Tesla, I think that the numbers are strong, but we know that until end of September and also in August as well, they had this 0% interest rate loan, which you could take in China in order to buy Tesla Model Y, I think, maybe even Model 3. So that affects, obviously, you get more demand, you get more sales, more deliveries, but you also get lower margin on the sales. So I don't necessarily see this as a great sign of strength from Tesla, especially knowing that as Xpeng, you can see, for example, Xpeng is also going up quite strongly upward. After they launch Xpeng Model 3, the demand is strong, but they just barely started to ramp up. So the first week of delivery was 2,220 deliveries, right? That's not a whole lot. With the strong demand that we've seen, I think some people talk about 30,000 people buying the car in the first 48 hours or something like that. I think that's gonna, as we go into October and November, put Xpeng's number even higher up and put pressure on Model 3. And the question that remains is then what happens in October when Xpeng kind of had a couple of more weeks to ramping up and the Tesla potentially removing that 0% interest rate loan. Maybe Q4 for Tesla will be very much weaker. So that's something to watch closely. LiAuto, I'm a bit, kind of worried because not fully worried, but I think we are maybe at the peaks of plug-in hybrid cars increase. I think this is the peak of the peak, for example, in let's say this year or next year sometime. Then after that, I expect that the growth shouldn't be much higher than it is now, and we can kind of visualize that number also looking at the graphs. We can see that Xpeng and Nio had a strong let's say 2020 and 2021, but then as you go into 2022 and 2023, they didn't increase their sales by a whole lot, whereas if you look at LiAuto, they went from 30,000 in 2020 to expected to do almost 500,000 this year. But I don't expect them to increase their numbers by a whole lot by next year. I'm not even confident of the 750. So let's wait and see. But yeah, so it's for the PHEVs, it's not it's great, but I don't expect that in the long range. Obviously, they will win against the fully electric vehicle cars. So if we go back to Nio, we can see that Nio is doing also. They are not on the 10-week average, although doing that great. It's kind of plateauing. But the important part for Nio is also that they are still well ahead of last year. And on the last 4 months, they have average around 20,000 cars. But now as Onvo comes into the picture, we could see Nio going upwards, increase this trend line to maybe 6,000 on average by end of next month or early in the month after. So I think Nio is also gonna put some pressure on Tesla in October and November as we go onwards to Q3, Q4, late Q4. So I'm not fully convinced that Tesla will sustain this kind of level. I think most likely they will plateau or even go down by substantial amount because Xpeng and Nio will put more pressure on Tesla. Now let's move to gross margin and vehicle delivery correlations for Nio. We can see that the correlation starts in Q4 of 2022. The reason why there wasn't any correlation, in my opinion, before that is a host of different things. Most importantly, the lithium carbonate price that translates to the battery purchase price had a price shock, an insane price shock in 22 and 23 and also part of 21. And that kind of price shock is a bit obviously delayed. So it takes a couple of months to translate that price shock to Nio's contracts. They don't buy batteries on day-to-day basis. They buy batteries, let's say, for 3 months, 6 months. They predict the supply chain. Once you manufacture cars, you have to predict supply chain at least for 1 year or 18 months. You cannot, go and buy a battery for tomorrow. So the price shock is obviously a bit delayed. Hence the delay also gross margin cut in Nio. For example, the price shock already started in late 21, but you can see Nio's margins were still fairly high, between 13 to 17%, and then the shock happened, a bit translated, obviously delayed for Nio in Q3 of 22. But anyways, we can see that in Q2 of 23, we start to increase the deliveries, and we start to increase the gross margin. Then the next quarter, slight cut in deliveries, 10%, and also 0.5% cut in gross margin. Then Q1 of 24 was really bad, 30,000 deliveries, huge drop off in gross margin. But interestingly, look at, for example, this quarter was Q1 of this year, 30,000 deliveries, which is similar to, let's say, if we go to, this one, Q1 of 2023, and look at the gross margin still being better, like 3 times better than Q1 of 23. And this is because of, a lot of different things. Obviously, lithium carbonate price, as we mentioned, the supply shock that happened. For example, the one container shipping from China to Europe was like 4 or 5x more expensive during this period here. So a lot of different things happened during that time. And going onwards, I think it's very possible that Nio will increase the gross margin already next quarter to just below 11%, based on the slightly more than 10% increase or around 10% increase in deliveries compared to Q2, which already had 9.7% gross margin, which already doubled Q1 of this year. But then I expect Q4 to increase the deliveries faster than Q3 increased compared to the previous quarter. And this is because of on-board deliveries, and also that Q4 is usually very strong for Nio. So based on those logic, we should see another increase in gross margin. And I think actually in this case, I'm very conservative. I think this could be 12.5%, 13 or 13.5%. And if we now go to, let's say, our numbers, look at Q4 numbers for 2024. So Q4, I counted on 11.8% gross margin, which results in 525 million in net loss. But if I increase that 11.8% gross margin to, let's increase it to 12.8, and how much will the 525 million loss decrease? It goes from actually, there you see, from 525 to 494. So a good 30 million cut in net loss. And by this kind of logic, you can see that, if we go now to, let's say, I don't know, let's go to half of Q2 of 2026. If I increase that gross margin number now to, let's say, 17%, based on that, as the deliveries increase for Nio, from, I don't know, like right now at 57,000 to 130,000 in Q2 of 26, we increased that gross margin from 15.8 that I had planned before to possibly, let's say, 17.8, they will go from minus 353 million net loss to 255. So that is, that is a very nice 60-70 million again cut in net loss. And if you continue to do this, Nio will be profitable much faster. So that's also very important, because the stock price, peaked in 21 as was elevated in 22 as well. So the question is, obviously, the market, if they start to gain some confidence on Nio, and if the gross margins for Nio kind of rebounds to a degree, what we could possibly see is that if they start to believe that the gross margin will be in the, let's say, mid 10 degrees, double digits, like 15-16% by next year, I think the stock price could gain more than 50% from here, because if they see that the gross margin increase 50%, the net loss will cut many more times more than that. So the company's future is not going to be at risk anymore, especially knowing that they have 5 or so billion on cash on hand. And if they want to, lose more than a couple of 100 millions at most on each quarter, let's say through 25, and then by 26 or 27 start to make money, and by 28 maybe start to make billions. And if you tell me that Nio, let's actually look at it, how much money can they make in 2028? So if we go look at the numbers, let's go to Q1 of 2028. If now my gross margin improves all of a sudden to, let's say, I don't know, let's go with 22.5%, based on, the same kind of logic that you can see here, that the delivery numbers increases faster, and if they are correlated, then technically gross margin should also go up faster than that my model has. But anyways, let's do that kind of calculation and see. So you can see in 2028, they could in one quarter make almost 700 million net income. That's annualized around $3 billion in net income in 2028. And we are almost, in Q4 of 2024. So it's essentially 3 years from now. for company that is, you know, priced at, I don't know, the company that right now is priced at around 10 billion US dollar. So I think this company, you know, all of a sudden it could be one nice deal with this kind of price at the level, despite increase of, you know, I don't know, from the lows of 3.5 US dollar. But again, this is not investment advice. I think we should, you know, things, I have to be honest, they start to look good for Nio, but we've been at this kind of stage before where everything looks good and then something bad happens. We don't know, there might be another lithium price shock, or there can be a host of other different things that derail this kind of future projections. So please follow the channel, and you know, I will update this every once in a while. And if something happens that might put that future to the risk, I will tell you that. But you know, do your own due diligence, and please don't put your, you know, money that you can lose in these kind of stocks. And yeah, so thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.